What is the philosophy of the Jedi Order? Now, the Jedi Order, depending on which time period, are slightly different to one another. Most notably, the most rigid and dogmatic of the different eras is the Jedi Order of the Prequel Era. But despite their differences, they are all based on some fundamental core principles. In this video, we will delve into what these principles are and what do they mean. But before the video starts, if you enjoy all things Star Wars, be sure to subscribe to this channel and join the community. The Jedi Order is a religious order of light side force users that was founded on the planet Ahch-To by the Prime Jedi. The religion is based on a number of sacred texts that cover the tenets, history, and guidance for all aspiring Jedi. While these books were fundamental to the development of the Jedi, as the Order progressed over thousands of years, they appear to have very little influence on the religion. This video won't go over what those specific texts are and their contents, as that would make for a very lengthy video. Besides, as Master Yoda says,
"Well, page turners, they were not."
To understand the philosophy of the Jedi Order, it's important to understand who their real-life inspirations are. Namely, it stems from three different religions/philosophies: Taoism, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. I won't go into too deep of details as to what these religions are, but if you're familiar with them, keep them in mind for the things that we will discuss later. Based on my interpretation, there are in fact three pillars that form the basis of Jedi philosophy. The first pillar of the Jedi philosophy is the belief in the universal energy called the Force. For the Jedi, the Force is a living spiritual presence that exists all around the galaxy and within all living beings. As such, for the Jedi, it is the ultimate goal to pursue and become one with the Force. In other words, for a Jedi, it is imperative to find balance in the Force. The second pillar is the belief of non-attachment. As such, Jedis are discouraged from holding on to strong emotional bonds, and it is the ultimate goal of all Jedi to achieve a state of selflessness and dispassionate compassion for all living things. To do so, the Jedis are encouraged to give up their worldly desires and to rise above these wants. The Jedis practice spiritual discipline and celibacy. As such, the Jedis will push aside personal desires in order to work towards a greater goal, which is peace and justice for all, which leads me into my third major pillar. The third pillar of the Jedi Order's philosophy is the belief in the light and the dark. For the Jedis, there is a distinction between what is good and what is evil. As such, anything associated with the light side of the Force is considered good, whereas anything associated with the dark side of the Force is considered bad. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the Jedi Order to guard against the dark side of the Force. All this is basically summed up in the Jedi Code. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. However, that being said, while these are the three pillars of Jedi philosophy, it is not absolute, and how a Jedi acts upon them is based on their own personal interpretations. Just like all philosophies or religion, various Jedis are on different points of a spectrum ranging from extreme to moderate. This is where you get variations of Jedi, such as Great Jedis or Wayseekers. If you're interested in what those are, I will link a video on the top right, so go check it out. In summary, depending on how rigid a Jedi's interpretation of these core tenets are, it will change how they act and respond to certain situations. So for the Jedi Order during the Prequel Era, it was arguably at its strictest interpretations, whereby the Jedi Order advocated for the complete repression of emotions and bonds. Under the Prequel Jedis, in order for a Jedi to become one with the Force, they had to become a complete extension of the Force that is devoid of all connections to the material world. Yet, for many Jedis, it was far too extreme and difficult to achieve, and I am sure we all know how well that turned out. It is no coincidence that during this rough time period, there were many Jedis that fell to the dark side, and it is no coincidence as to what this meant for the future of the Jedi Order. The extreme dogmatic readings of the Jedi Order set a bar that was incredibly high, and not only that, but in some ways, the rigid interpretation actually contradicted their own philosophy. Specifically, with this type of interpretation, there's a major contradiction between the first pillar and the second pillar. As we went through earlier, the first pillar describes the Force as something that is all around us and is embodied by all living things. In other words, the Force is part of the natural world. Now consider the second pillar, where Jedis are encouraged to forego all personal attachments and rise above material desires while achieving a state of dispassionate compassion. Do you see the contradiction? An extreme reading of the Jedi philosophy contradicts these three pillars because if the Force does flow and is a part of all natural things, which the Jedi are themselves, would it not be the case that it would be unnatural if one were to purge all emotional connections? On top of that, with the absence of all emotional connections, how would a Jedi take action to help those in need? Here's an example. Remember the scene during Attack of the Clones when Padme falls out of the LAAT gunship? In this moment, we see a clear depiction of the extreme reading of the Jedi philosophy in action. When Padme falls out of the gunship and Anakin wants to turn the ship around, he is strongly motivated by his attachments, whereas in contrast, Obi-Wan, following the rigid understanding of the Jedi Order, disagrees and pushes them to continue to chase Dooku. Obi-Wan here represents the entirety of the prequel Jedi Order, setting aside personal wants to achieve the greater goal. But in doing so, he displays a complete lack of compassion or empathy for the situation. What if Padme had been critically injured and required immediate medical assistance? And what if the decision to carry on cost her her life? Now, of course, Padme turned out to be just fine, but in that moment, Obi-Wan did not know that, and took an active decision to implicitly say that one life is worth risking for the sake of the greater good, whatever that means. Can you see why this might be a problem? Obi-Wan, by not having any empathy in that moment, was ill-equipped to help someone in need, and we all know how that turned out.
You underestimate my power!
And this is reflected all over the era of the prequel Jedis. The galactic slave trade is essentially left unchecked in Hutt space, and instead of reaching out to help those in need, the prequel Jedis look inward and retreated to the temple on Coruscant. Now consider Kanan Jarrus, who has a more moderate understanding of these three pillars. Under the authority of the prequel Jedi Order, Kanan would not have succeeded in becoming a Jedi. His attachments and relationships with Hera Syndulla would have most certainly been prohibited. However, despite this, Kanan was able to maintain a deep bond and connection to Hera while remaining a Jedi and closely connected to the light side of the Force. Unlike the prequel Jedis, Kanan is very much in tune with the Force and understands that attachments are not a sure path to the dark side of the Force. Instead, while Kanan has attachments, he makes sure that it does not lead him astray to harbor dark side emotions such as anger and hate. He makes sure that fear does not rule over him. This is clearest when Hera is captured by the Empire and Kanan, acting purely on uncontrolled emotion, recklessly tries to save her, but is ultimately stopped by Loth Wolves, animals with deep connections to the Force. This is where he learns that by acting recklessly on his emotions, he would not only be unsuccessful, but putting everyone else in danger as well. It is here that Kanan is able to strike a balance between understanding his emotions and avoiding recklessness, which all the more brings him closer to the Force. In many ways, Kanan demonstrates that emotions are a part of the Force. Instead of purging himself of all connections, Kanan is able to embrace a dispassionate compassion for others precisely because he does not repress all of his emotions. After all, for a Jedi to help those in need, it requires them to have a connection of empathy in the first place. As such, by being able to hold on to his attachments while making sure his emotions do not control his every action, Kanan is arguably far closer to the Force than most Jedi and stay far more true to the core tenets of the Jedi philosophy. So that is my beginner's guide to the philosophy of the Jedi Order. If you have any questions or require clarifications in some areas, let me know. If you disagree with what I've just said, be sure to let me know as well. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. As always, I am the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.